I'm going to begin a new series, and it's called The Planets Are the Forces of Human Nature. And I'm proposing that we establish a proper psychological paradigm to codify what actually constitutes the inner workings of the human mind and our behavior, our thoughts, and our desires, everything that constitutes the complexity of human experience. Astrologers have been working on this for decades, and we need to take it a step further and create a working model for astrological psychology that gives results and it can be understood on a wider scale. There have been many paradigms created by psychologists since the late 1800s and throughout the 20th century, but in my opinion, none of them have lasting explanative power because they're man-made and not based on natural principles or an ordered system that exists in creation. And one example of an ordered system that exists in creation would be that you can see the golden ratio in plants. And on a macrocosmic level, another system is you can see the patterned orbits of the planets as they're seen from Earth. The most contemporary attempts to codify human nature, or at least to understand why humans behave in certain ways, is through neuroscience and genetics. But studying brain matter and how neurons are firing is greatly limited, and it's even very controversial. And the genetic code doesn't address topics like free will. And both of these methods are extremely materialistic. They don't account for other layers of reality. The standard manual for psychological therapy today is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual number 5, called the DSM-5, which isn't a codification for who humans are, but is a manual for how humans are faltering and are maladjusted for our modern system. And of course, they document in extensive detail mental diseases and mental illness. But again, it's not a system that we can live by and aspire to. It's a system of codifying the problems in human beings. The scientific and academic communities have attempted to validate astrology using their preferred method of data analysis and statistics, but this doesn't work for two reasons. The first is that you can't quantify the subtle energetic fields and patterns of the planets, just as how you can't quantify and measure a chakra within your body using their methods and using their instruments. But at the same time, we know that chakras exist. I had the thought when I was a lot younger that one day science will be able to quantify psychic phenomena, but we don't live in that age today. But when you think about it, that's what astrology is. It's in a way of quantifying and qualifying psychic phenomenon, or you could say the subtle energetic patterns of the universe. And the second reason that you can't statistically measure astrology, it's because you can't simplify astrology into these very tight categories. For example, creating a spreadsheet of everyone with Mars in Gemini, they're going to experience X, Y, and Z, and these traits and these characteristics and these experiences. Astrology is far more complex, and there are so many factors at play, even beyond the core natal chart itself. And so all of the complex factors create the complexity of human beings and why everyone is so different. And this is where astrologers and the work that they do comes into play, using their training to be interpreting the chart. And it's why we need better astrologers experimenting and finding more accurate techniques. You can't expect a geologist to perform open heart surgery, and you can't expect a statistician to read a natal chart. It's just a completely different skill set. All of these topics I'll be exploring in greater detail on this channel and in my Substack, Multiple Futures. But before I can even get to the criticisms of those scientific paradigms and how to reinterpret those scientific paradigms into the lens of astrology, I need to be presenting the paradigm of astrology and show how it is the system that explains human nature and the patterns of consciousness that our soul is experiencing in this lifetime on Earth. And as a very interesting thought experiment, other realms and other universes can have completely different modes of consciousness, because they have different planets and therefore different energetic patterns within them, much different from our own. And you can see that that is such a fascinating road of thought to think about, and the possibilities in that are endless. And I've said before, if another planet were to come and enter into our zodiac, into our realm, our consciousness would then change, and we would add that planet's qualities into our human experience. So I'm going to begin with the 7 visible planets in this series, which are the core of our conscious awareness. And I'm going to be doing 5 videos per planet to start off. And the first one is going to be just the essentials of the planet. The second will be how that planet malfunctions by examining what zodiac sign that planet is debilitated in. And then the third will be showing how that planet, in its exalted form, the best expression of that planet by studying what zodiac sign the planet is exalted in. And then in the 4th and 5th videos, I'm going to be talking about how the planets treat other planets as either friends, neutral, or enemies, and showing how the relationships of the planets or the relationships of the forms of consciousness, the forces of consciousness within you, have different agendas, and they work well or they work worse in relationship with other planets. So for example, the sun treats the moon, Mars, and Jupiter as friends because they're helping the sun within us express its qualities. And then Venus and Saturn are treated as enemies by the sun because they hinder the inherent qualities of the sun, or they make those qualities of the sun within you more difficult to express. And I'll be covering Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes, later on, but those are the forces of unconsciousness within us. And then, of course, later I'll be studying the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the planets we can't see with our naked eye, and how those planets are forces of our subconsciousness. And we're going to be discussing all of that in more detail much later on. But what's important is that this series is the beginning foundation to refer back to when we start breaking down how other psychological paradigms are defining human nature, and we're going to be juxtaposing why astrology is better to understand human nature and the limitations of the other psychological paradigms. Astrology as a practice has come a long way in the past 100 years towards understanding human psychology, and it's time that it is treated as a serious spiritual science by a larger audience who are increasingly seeing that the modern world is very toxic for their mental health. For me, astrology is not just the study of human beings, but it's an ancient system that describes the energetic realities of any point in time. So it's describing much more than just human life and human psychology. Just like Carillion photography, if we could see the subtle auric fields with our naked eye, we would also be seeing the auric fields of the planets themselves. And what's very interesting is we would also be seeing other macro energetic forces in the heavens that are still yet to be discovered.